Hello and welcome to episode 4 in the incredible brand new Kyosho Ultima build. In this episode we are going to be blasting through some of the build stages and showing you how we have done some of the technical assemblies and showing you some of the tools we have used, as well as taking the build through to the assembly of the rear end, the front end and the main chassis. But actually we found this to be a super easy build, and if you just follow the instructions you can't go wrong, which is why we will be skipping some of the build stages and flying through this section before getting onto the power systems, shocks and the finishing touches in the next few episodes, and see this come to life for the very first time. And in this episode we'll also show you some of the materials and cool parts that are part of this kit, so let's get straight into it. Now what we're going to do firstly is finish off the rear assembly. So what we have here is our motor mount that we saw last time, and this important pin here that we've locked tighted into position. And as with everything else on the buggy, this has a really nice fit to it, and the super cool iconic motor shield back here, and that will all fit onto the rear gearbox housing, which will start to build up into a really solid back end. The next stage is to actually replace this pin that we used in the last episode as a guide pin, but this time we're going to be fixing it into place with all the gears. Now note that this gear has a slipper clutch assembly on it, which means if you crash or drive into a wall, or the car comes to a dead stop whilst the motor is still running, or you land a big jump and get a sudden almost stopping motion through the wheels when they touch down, the clutch pads will start to slip and the power from the motor won't continue being transferred into the gearbox and drivetrain, whilst the gears and wheels are locked in position and can't move anyway. So this is a fail-safe mechanism just to protect the motor and drivetrain from excessive strain and shock. And actually, you see this more on vehicles that you'll jump, so buggies, trucks, both electric and nitro, but not so much on on-road cars. So for example, our Tamiya TT01 and TT02 builds don't have a slipper clutch. But assemble that as per the instructions and slide that through the gearbox where it will lock into place with the gears that are already in there. Then get your spring and nut and tighten that on. Now what the spring and nut do is control the pressure of the friction clutch material, that soft clutch pad you saw us fit just now, and the metal plates on either side of it. So the looser the nut is, the less force is needed for the clutch plates to slip, and vice versa. And if you have it too tight, then you might as well not have one at all, because it will never slip, and if you crash, the motor will come to a dead lock from high speed and high RPMs, and so will the drivetrain, which isn't good. Similarly, if it's too loose, the clutch will constantly slip and wear out, and power won't be transferred from the motor to the drivetrain. And that there is assembled. Now what I didn't realise is that you actually don't need to use your jumper for this stage to hold the gear in place. In fact, Kyosho have given you a perfect tool for this, which is great. Now this is where we want to show you one of the tools that we've used. One thing I have noticed, which was actually the same on the original Ultima, is that none of the rods and turnbuckles have the little hex bit in the middle of the rod to help you adjust them once they're on the car. However, you can upgrade these to the optional parts, part number 92413, which have the little adjuster on them. So the way I'm going to put these together is to hold the rod with our shock pliers. So get the rod ends and screw them on, making sure they are nice and straight. One thing to note is that the rod ends have a certain distance from each other to make them a set length. And if one rod is a different length to the other, your wheels may be misaligned or you will have the wrong toe angle and you'll notice the tyres will start to wear unevenly. So screw the ends on with an even amount of turns from each side. And you can see that every few turns we are checking the distance to make sure it's correct to what's specified in the manual. So you can do that with your ruler or a caliper. But once you have them screwed on, you can put the balls in too with the shock pliers, and that's it. One thing I will say is that these pliers we've got here don't have many grooves on them for different diameter shafts, which is a bit of a pain, and you'll see later on that the steering arm with this kit is too thin to be held by this set of pliers. So you might have to hold that by hand or get a different set of pliers. But once that's done, you can simply start assembling the rear end one bit at a time. You can see we've got these super tough newly designed shock towers, and actually quite a few of you replied in the comments last time to our question and let us know that the original ones were in fact just plate metal stamped out, but these seem super tough. But that's it, the brand new shiny arms are on, everything is nice and smooth. We've also put a coating of thin oil on all the metal parts and wiped it down just to give the metal parts a nice protective film from the elements and water. And this whole assembly will just simply fit onto the rear end of the chassis. And that is exactly what we're going to do now. Finally, we can bring in this fantastic, incredible looking chassis from Kyosho. What an excellent piece of metalwork and a really iconic design. So if we grab that, you can see there are these series of holes here on the rear end. And the rear end assembly that we've just built will screw onto that. Now this is a bit fiddly with the motor shield, but everything there all fits securely and snugly into certain grooves. So make sure everything sits nicely before you tighten up any of the screws. So the arm pins go through there, onto the back bar across the bottom, and in that bar there are also some grooves for the motor mount, and once you fit this onto the chassis everything will get clamped and secured into position, which is a good design. So take that, fit it in place, and then you can start putting in your screws, making sure that you have the correct screws because they are not actually symmetrical and the screws on one side are shorter than the ones on the other side. So do take note of this in the manual. But once you're confident you have the right ones in there, go ahead, screw them in, and again make sure you don't over tighten them and damage the plastic thread. there you go, what an amazing finish, such a nice model. You will be left with this really nice flush flat skid plate. And to be honest, I don't want to get a single scratch on this. But the next stage is to fit the rear hubs, knuckles and drive shafts. And again, same with everything we've done so far, this is relatively straightforward. Finally, you can slide the bearings in. And the drive shafts and the drive cups. And again, we've coated these with a layer of oil and wiped it off just to give them a microfilm of protection from the elements. And that's it, easy as that. Do the same with the other side, fit the little bar and the rear end is pretty much done. Now one thing you've got here are these little spacers or adjusters, and these are to adjust the angle of the rear camber. So you've got 3 different options, 2 degrees, 3 degrees and 3.5 degrees. And the manual initially tells us to use the 3.5 degree ones, which is what we're going to do. So that slides into there like so, and we can just fit the knuckles on, making sure that you fit them the right way. Next, flying through the build stages, another easy bit with these little side bars. These are just in there to keep the battery nice and secure, and also so that the metal won't cut into the battery if it rattles around. And these just clip and snap onto the chassis. One thing I did notice is that the drive shaft comes quite far out of the drive cup, and I wonder if this will ever pop out whilst we're driving it. But I think once the shocks are on and the arms are held a little higher, that won't be a problem. If it is a problem, you can use a bit of fuel hose to stop them coming out, but we'll show you how to do this if it becomes a problem later on. And at this stage, the Ultima buggy is really starting to take shape, and I can't wait to finish this. Next, one of the critical assemblies, the steering. and again giving us the confidence to really rip this buggy around the track on and off road. The steering parts seem solid, tough, and they all fit together really nicely with a nice interface and no play in them, and that's exactly what I expected from this model. So fit the support shaft on there. Fit the other upright parts. With the steering horn there too. This little cross beam to secure the two sides together. And then you can attach the steering linkages. And that's it, as easy as that. And finally, we can start to assemble the front end with the shock towers and the arms. And again, we have this super tough shock tower, which I'm sure will be able to take some big hits. Not that it will be crashing too much. And of course, the front end is a lot easier to assemble than the rear because there's no gears to worry about or drivetrain. And then similarly to the rear, we can mount that onto the chassis whilst at the same time also fitting this little tough front bumper. And there you go, you'll be left with this amazing looking model, ready for the wheels, tyres, shocks and the power system to come in the next few episodes, as well as the finishing touches, which include the body, stickers and the roll cage. And that's it, a super quick little episode flying through some of the build stages on our way to completing this excellent re-release Kyosho Ultima, which is now available to buy. In the next few episodes, we will be building and fitting the shocks, as well as assembling the wheels and tyres, and starting to prepare and paint the body, which will be really cool. Gonna look amazing. So do watch out for those, and also watch out for our brand new super website coming out this year, which is going to be a huge community website, and we'll be letting you know a lot more about that very shortly, which will be really exciting. But that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this little episode. Please do rate, comment and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching and see you soon.